As I said yesterday, this is now Wednesday, as I said yesterday, Tuesday, our Bible is more like a jigsaw puzzle than a book we read cover to cover. And like a jigsaw puzzle, in the Bible we suddenly find new pieces that reveal more of the total picture that motivates us to continue to try to fit all these pieces together to look at the large picture. And let's keep at it, just like a jigsaw puzzle. Let's keep reading the Bible, and we will see how God's plan for his whole creation comes together, all connected by the dots that eventually show us a complete picture. Let's go back to the word-oriented concordance and use the word adoption. And you'll see quite a difference between the Old and the New Testament definitions. Again, I'm Reverend Paul Tuttle, retired Presbyterian minister up here at Community Church in Berlin, playing the praise band, but every fourth week or so I do a week of these devotions. And this week we're looking through the Bible, trying to maybe approach it a little differently as I'm using some examples. Let's look this morning, Wednesday, at Galatians, the 4th chapter, verses 4 to 7. Galatians was written before Romans, and in the adult class we dealt with Romans a couple of weeks ago, but Galatians was written ahead of time. And listen to what the author, Apostle Paul, had in mind. I remind you, the Apostle Paul was both an active Jew, could read and write obviously, but he also was a Roman citizen. Very unusual for people in the Apostle Paul's time. In Galatians 4, verse 4, he writes, the Apostle Paul, "But when the fulfillment of the time came," one of my great understandings of that is time itself. And if you look in the concordance, the biblical concordance of the word time, you'll find two definitions. The one definition comes from the Latin word chronos. Chronos means linear time. Time that makes sense. It's a straight line. It's last year, last decade, last century. There's another word for time in the Bible called kairos. And kairos is the opportune time, the appropriate time. And this is the kind of time that the Apostle Paul quotes in Galatians 4, verse 4. When the right time came along, God sent his Son, born through a woman, born under the law. This was so he could redeem those under the law so that we could be adopted. So Paul is introducing the right time and the concept of being adopted. The Jewish people, hearing this, would go, "What's adopted?" Because you see, in ancient Jewish world, they didn't even have a word for the idea of being adopted. There was not a practice in the Old Testament times, the idea of adopting somebody. But in the Roman world, the Latin world, the world where St. Paul was a citizen, adoption was very, very prevalent. As a matter of fact, it was preferred because the person with material things, the person who had status in the community, the person who didn't want to give up his position in the community or in the village, he wanted the right person to inherit all of that and carry forth the way he conducted himself. And so those with means, those with status, those with titles would often adopt a young person, almost always a male, of course, to take over his inheritance. And he would therefore become part of the family. And that was preferred even beyond the biology of having a male heir. So it's an interesting contrast between those two. So that we could be adopted, because we are sons and daughters. And God sent the Spirit of the Son into the hearts, crying, "Abba, Father." And here Paul introduces a different idea. Rather than When Jesus taught about how to pray, say, Our Father. Apostle Paul uses the word Abba, meaning my Father, going from all of our Father, that is God, to my Father, my personal Father. Therefore, we are no longer a slave, but a son or a daughter. We don't have to earn a place or our status. It's the prodigal son when Jesus teaches in Luke 15, once you are a child, you are always a child. And God always forgives and welcomes you back and restores you to an inheritance, but more so a status that you don't have to earn. And in Romans 8, the companion to this, a little later on, written after Galatians, Paul finishes it by simply saying, we are all God's children, and therefore fellow heirs with Jesus Christ. So if we really suffer with Jesus, we can also be glorified with him. To be adopted by God, to be adopted by Jesus Christ, is to be more complete. It goes from our group being our Father to my personal belief and witness and conviction. Both of these need to be so we can be complete ourselves in our own discipleship, because all of the pieces of God's jigsaw plan have to come together, and we are part of God's jigsaw plan. I'll tell you more about it tomorrow when we come back.